I'm releasing another album. And today I want to talk about what happened yesterday on the final Make an Album with Mike session, where we did some brainstorming around, or what I call thought-doing, around releasing these things and what you're going to do with them. Because you might think that making albums in this day and age, with streaming, which obviously pushes most people probably towards singles and things like that, it might seem that it's pointless, but it's absolutely not, for a number of different reasons. And so I'll talk a bit about what happened on the session yesterday, and also how I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with this album, and also possibly, if I have time, what sort of my broader plans for this podcast, because obviously I'm immediately starting another one and other stuff that's on the horizon as well. So I completed the album, as I said, at 11 o'clock on my Thursday night, and the final sweet release, it's called, session with the first Make an Album with Mike group happened, and I ran them through an exercise which was intended to broaden their horizons about what they can do with the music that they've made. Because really, even if you don't want to release albums as albums, what you've done by making an album is made an enormous amount of music in a relatively short space of time, which to a larger or lesser extent will hang together in some way. I mean, even my albums in the past, which I've often said are all over the place, still have a kind of a sound to them, even though they're not as homogenous as one thing as I would like them to be. And these pieces of music are an asset. I mean, they're not an asset in the same way as they used to be when you used to press records and do things like that, but they are still an asset. And this was one of the questions that I asked the folks yesterday, and it'd be good for you to think about it as well. So, am I making a podcast about making an album, or am I making an album in order to make a podcast? That's a very interesting question, isn't it? I mean, especially given that now both the album that comes out and my podcasts could be on Spotify if I choose for them to be. I mean, the podcast already is on Spotify. Obviously, it's in a different area and it has different rights and royalties attached to it, but it's basically in the same app. You can listen to it in the same place. I mean, that has always been true of YouTube, for instance. Maybe not always, but it's been true of YouTube for a long time. So, is the podcast promoting the album, or is the album promoting the podcast? Maybe it's both. And this is one of the things that it's really important to get your head around. A lot of people are still stuck in an age that no longer exists. And they're probably bemoaning the fact that it no longer exists. And in many ways, I agree with them. I came up in a very different... I mean, I don't think it even is the same music industry. It's a completely different one. And this is something that I'm thinking about a lot, especially with the AI explosion that's happened over the last few weeks. Literally, it's just gone ballistic. Because in a world where, I mean, this was always, it happened to a certain extent when the internet democratized the distribution of art and, let's call it content, although I hate that word, but it democratized the distribution of art and music. Meant that, anyone could distribute anything, which then also meant these platforms grew up where anyone was releasing anything on them. And so music was alongside movies, was alongside pictures of cats, was alongside ads for, I don't know, washing detergent. So in a sense, everything is in the same place. Now it used to be that you'd get your music from a cassette, like a cassette player or a record player or something like that. So it was a different thing. Now, much of the stuff you consume is all from the same rectangular screen, right? It's the same rectangular device. So everything's in the same place. And that kind of creates an unusual situation. And now and I don't want this podcast to be about AI, and I'll talk about that more another time. But, now with the advent of AI, I mean, what essentially AI is making happen is that the creation of music and art and content and writing is becoming digitized as well, and therefore democratized. So if skill, the actual how-to is no longer required, if you don't have to be an artist to create a piece of art, I don't have to be a musician to create a piece of music, which was already happening with other technology as well, DAWs and everything like that. So if you don't have to be that, then in what sense is a musician still a musician? Right? Now, I'm not saying that anything I say in around here isn't judging it, neither good nor bad. I'm just talking about the way it is. And so, in a sense, a piece of music obviously is different to a podcast, obviously. But I could release a piece of music on a podcast. I could release my album on a podcast. And then I could also release it on Spotify by uploading it through a digital distributor. But it will end up in the same place. And obviously, as I said, the royalties would be different. But this distinction is becoming very muddy. And it's something I think that could be viewed as being a terrible thing, or it could be also viewed as being a bunch of opportunities. Because, I mean, the way I see it and the way I'm proceeding forward is that I am a musician historically, and I have certain skills. My kind of unique makeup is one of someone who is focused on music and becoming great at making music. Well, when I say great at making music, good as good as I am at making music. Yeah. So I don't want to suggest that I'm great at making music, but that's where my skills lie. But that's not the only set of skills I have. And so I really see myself as a creator now, as a maker, someone who creates stuff, who has a certain set of skills. And if you start to look at things like that, then you will fast realize that music is just another skill that you have. But, I think a lot of music artists are, I just want to make music. That's absolutely fine. But for good or ill, in order to have that music be relevant, you're going to have to sort of think of yourself as a creator in some way of things aside from music or with that music. So, for example, one of my skills is talking a lot, as my wife will attest to, and as you will attest to if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time. So, one of my skills is talking a lot and rambling and going off on squirrely journeys into all sorts of different areas when I'm meant to be talking about this thing. So, looking at that, one of the things that I can do is create podcasts until I'm blue in the face, until probably you're blue in the face as well. And so that's something that I'm doing around the creation of my music. And in a sense, I mean, is it promoting the music? I mean, I haven't played you any of it yet, but it's promoting something. I mean, similarly, another of my skills is coaching, is the ability to help people kind of find breakthroughs in their music and in their lives and what they're doing, and create workshops and create courses and programs and all of that kind of thing. And so, again, that's something else. It's podcasting, basically talking, podcasting, making music, coaching are the areas in which I'm creating. And in the releasing of this album, I'm interested to try to do some other things as well. Video, images, storytelling. There's all kinds of things that I could be doing with this. And it's difficult for me to say which is the product, because really it's all the product. It's all, really, one question to ask yourself when it feels like technology is making less relevant certain things, for good or ill, right? One of the questions that you just have to ask yourself is what isn't going away. And there's something that isn't going away anytime soon anyway. And that is the need for humans to connect with other humans. I had a conversation with the coaches a couple of days ago, the Make Music Live coaches, and Jonah, and she said something. Was it Jonah? I think it was Jonah. It was either Jonah or Hutch. But anyway, said something about what isn't going away is. What is the purpose of music in the first place? I think it was Jonah. The purpose of music in the first place, back in the dim and distant past, was around a fire for people to connect around sort of something that will it's kind of got a tribal aspect to it, and that remains today. You could describe different genres as being very tribal. It's certainly what I now see very clearly as I coach people who write all kinds of different music. It's like everyone has this sort of belief that their music is well, not everyone, because I don't, and I know a lot of people who also don't, but there's a lot of people who believe that their music is good music and other tribes' music is bad music, right? You may well be one of them. I did for years. And so, there's a real tribal, and that's about human connection. So, in my situation, what is the product here? Is the product here an album? Is the product here a podcast? Is the product here the Make an Album with Mike program? Is the product here, what is it? Is it a video I can put on YouTube? No, what the product is the community that is being built around it. And obviously, if you're listening to a podcast and you're not interacting with anybody else within the Make Music Live community, that's fine. But you are, in a sense, because I just talked about Jonah, didn't I? And Hutch. So I'm relaying, you're actually connecting with my community via this podcast. And as time goes on, you may well decide that you want to come closer to the community. Oh, this sounds like a tribe I could be a member of. And really, these various different media, these different mediums, are ways in which this community is being built. And so when you look at it like that, the album, while yes, I want it to be a thing on its own, it isn't the thing, and if it doesn't in itself do very well, that has not made it a waste of time in terms of the external benefit of it in any way, shape or form. Because it's actually an opportunity for me to build more, to build more community, to connect with more people, by talking about it, by making music videos for the various different tracks, for creating a story around it. There's just unlimited opportunity there. So on the Sweet release call with the Make an Album with Mike program yesterday, I essentially asked the group what it was, what they were interested in, what they had been obsessed by, what their various different interests were, what outside of music, and got them to think about how they could, or what different things they could do to, not exactly, because it's not promote the album, although that comes into it, but what it could be. And there was all kinds of, how it could kind of fit, how the album could support something else. What skills do they have? What obsessions do they have? What interests do they have? And I mean, it was absolute. And then I went around the whole group, everyone who was there, and actually had a conversation with each of them and asked them, what ideas they came up with. And it was absolutely amazing to hear. I mean, there was everything from GUI design, so graphical user interface for, music, MIDI stuff, to shamanic dreaming, to what else was there? Workshops for big, corporate, big business, to making costumes, to ambisonic sound mixing, to VR venue creation. It was absolutely mind-blowing how these albums that the wonderful participant have made were the beginnings of something, we're contributing to something else. Either as a demonstration or as a piece of music they're using for whatever the thing might be. There was a mental health podcast idea as well. There was a T-shirt one. There was an indigenous. And there were multiple different ways that people were thinking about this music, because and how it would support these other products and services and shows and what have you. I mean, the album music can simply be the backing music. The using the album tracks as demonstrations is another thing that you can do. Obviously in something like a VR music venue, you can play the album, you can do a launch party there. I mean, if you're, would it be called mixing ambisonically? I don't know. Mixing in ambisonic? I don't know. Anyway, let's just say mixing ambisonically, because I think that sounds quite cool. So if you're mixing ambisonic, you can actually demonstrate the mixing of the piece of music on your album that you're making. Doing that. I mean, in my case, it's been a demonstration thing where I've essentially been talking about my, it's like a diary, which I'm using as an opportunity to help you. So in other words, the album and the podcast are, in a sense, promoting my coaching. Yep, there's the Make an Album with Mike program. So, all of these things, when you think of, if I was to say, if you take out this context, I got an email from someone saying, why would I write an album? I tried writing an album last year, and on Spotify, I only made like 30 cents. No one seems to want to listen to a whole album, but, I did get signed to this label or other, and so I'm just focused on singles. To me, I mean, that makes sense. I get that. That's right. That's correct. But it's a very contracted view of what music is in the modern world, or what music could be in the modern world. Particularly when we start to look at what's happening now which we can't help but look at, with AI. So with this album, I and the other Make an Album with Mike group, we've created an asset, or really a bunch of assets, which we can use in various different ways. Of course, one of which is releasing it as an album, as a product on its own, to help us, promote our music career, our music, our other music as well. And that's even aside from all of the benefits of making an album in the first place. So what am I going to do? How am I going to do that? Well, the honest truth is, at this point, I don't exactly know. I mean, for sure, I'm going to carry on doing the album podcast into the making of the 6th album, and also which will be about how I'm releasing and what I'm doing with the release of this 5th one as well. Thing is, I haven't yet made the decision because I'm very much a person which is, right, next step, just focus on the step that you're making now rather than at 10 steps in the future. So I've got some thinking to do, which is what I'm going to go and do now. And I will continue just for the next few days with these daily podcasts. So because there's a few bits and pieces that I just still have to talk about, which I think you'll find valuable about the finishing of this 5th album, which is called What Now, by the way, which is also the first track on the album. So I do have some more stuff to talk about and share with you. But for now, I need to stop talking about releasing an album and start releasing it.